Today, getting a medical checkup is incredibly simple. A sterile room, a painless vaccine. You leave with a tiny band-aid. But here's the thing. Not long ago, surgery was a death sentence. A complete nightmare. Imagine walking into a hospital in the year 1840. The air is thick with the smell of rotting flesh. No painkillers exist. A broken leg means being pinned down to a wooden table by 4 grown men. The tools are unwashed, covered in the blood of previous patients. The doctor steps up. Actually, he is wearing a coat stiff with dried pus. A crowd of tourists is watching, drinking beer. This is a public circus. Think about it. Your survival depends on how fast he can saw. Before we understood germs, surgery was about physical strength. But here is the thing. The Victorian era changed everything. Cities were growing rapidly. Factories were popping up, and industrial accidents were becoming a daily horror. Hospitals were overwhelmed with broken bodies. Actually, early Victorian doctors did not study in clean labs. They learned by dissecting stolen bodies in dark rooms. Grave robbing was incredibly common. Think about it. A corpse was worth more than a living worker. This created a dark economy of bone and flesh. Except, the public still viewed surgeons as butchers rather than respected saviors. They operated in the worst conditions imaginable. Dirt was everywhere. It turns out blood was a badge of honor for doctors, setting the stage for an era of unmatched pain. Before anesthesia, surgery was a race against the clock. Imagine the sheer terror, hearing the surgeon prep his instruments. Actually, patients could hear every bone saw scrape and metallic clink. It turns out speed was the only mercy. A slow surgeon meant certain death from shock. So, the clock was the ultimate judge, ticking down their life. The famous Robert Liston enters. He was known as the fastest bone saw in the West. He could amputate a leg in under 30 seconds. Think about it, 30 seconds of sheer, unadulterated agony. But speed had a dark side. In his rush, Liston once cut off his assistant's fingers and accidentally slashed a spectator's coat. The spectator died of fright right there on the spot. Except, both patient and assistant also died later, making it a 300% mortality rate. Imagine walking into a theater for surgery. It was shaped exactly like a steep, tiered Roman amphitheater. But here's the thing. Anyone could buy tickets. Wealthy tourists paid good money to watch the show. Hundreds of people packed into the circular wooden galleries. Students jostled with curious onlookers. They brought snacks and drank pints of beer. The entire room smelled of sweat, stale food, and panic. Actually, spectators wore their filthy everyday coats straight from the street, shaking off thick mud and horse manure. Filthy particles rained down toward the open operating table. Below them, a terrified patient lay completely exposed and shivering. The surgeon stepped forward, bowing dramatically. It turns out, people even placed bets on speed. A horrifying public circus of blood and agony. The operation is over, but the real battle has just begun. Within days, a burning fever takes hold. It turns out the wounds were crawling with an unseen killer. But back then, doctors had absolutely no idea that germs even existed. They believed bad smells alone caused all sickness. So, they never washed their hands. Actually, they wiped instruments on their filthy black aprons. Think about it. A blood-caked apron was a sign of a busy, experienced surgeon. The ward smelled of sweet, rotting flesh. They called it hospital gangrene. If the surgery did not kill you, the hospital infection surely would. Imagine, they washed wounds using the exact same dirty sponge for every patient, spreading deadly rot from bed to bed. Doctors were completely blind to the microscopic war. But an even bigger, more chaotic shift was about to arrive. In 1846, a strange gas changed everything. Ether, the first real anesthetic. But here's the thing. Early ether was highly explosive. Operating rooms with open gas lamps could literally explode. So, doctors turned to a new chemical, chloroform. Queen Victoria herself used it during childbirth, making anesthesia suddenly incredibly fashionable. Imagine, the horror of surgical pain was finally gone. Except, this miracle created a deadly trap. Actually, doctors did not know how to measure doses. Too much chloroform simply stopped the heart. A teenage girl named Hannah Greener became its first victim. She died during a routine toenail operation, shocking the world. Is pain relief worth the risk of death? This mixed blessing was about to trigger surgery's darkest era. Pain was gone, but a far worse nightmare was creeping in. Actually, surgeons stopped rushing, taking their sweet time. They performed far longer, much more invasive surgeries, digging filthy fingers deep inside open bodies. This triggered the notorious black period of surgery. Mortality rates began to skyrocket. They called it hospitalism, a slow, rotting death. Think about it. The ward was deadlier than the knife. Surgery became a weapon of infection. Except, old doctors stubbornly refused to wash their hands. They believed dripping pus was a sign of healing. Bed sheets and tools were used over and over. Patients literally ran away from hospitals in terror. Survival was a coin toss, until one man decided to challenge the entire establishment. Joseph Lister, a quiet Scottish surgeon, had a wild theory. He noticed carbolic acid stopped the terrible stench of city sewers. It did not just mask the smell, it stopped rot. So, he decided to spray it directly onto a boy's broken leg. Several days later, the bandage was peeled back, revealing clean, healthy skin. The hospital assistants were absolutely stunned. Lister then built a strange carbolic spraying machine. It pumped a thick chemical mist directly over the operating table, but other doctors hated it, complaining of slippery hands. Lister published his incredible results, hoping to save lives. Instead, the old medical establishment openly laughed at his work. They called germs imaginary, invisible little monsters. But Lister absolutely refused to quit, because in his ward, almost every single patient was surviving, while other hospitals were still operating like blood-soaked butcher shops. But here is the thing. The truth could not be hidden. Foreign doctors started visiting Lister. Actually, a German clinic decided to copy his methods. Their gangrene rate instantly dropped from 80% to 0. The medical world stood shocked. Slowly, the old guards began to wash their hands. It turns out they did not just stop at antiseptic sprays, they invented aseptic surgery. Imagine, sterilizing everything before the patient even enters the room, boiling the tools in clean water, scrubbing down the entire operating theater, replacing blood-caked black aprons with bright, sterile white coats, redesigning hospitals with massive windows for fresh air, separating sick patients to stop infections from spreading, transforming a dark house of death into a modern clinic. Today, we take painless medicine for granted. But here's the thing. It was not free. Modern comfort was purchased with blood, by those who lay shivering under the surgeon's cold, heavy saw, screaming in dark rooms. Imagine their absolute, helpless terror. Yet, their agony built knowledge, forcing the scientific world to evolve. We buried their screams in clean white clinics. But when you heal, you are not just safe. You are living their dream.